Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kids of all ages. It's great to see you. Welcome again to ExploraVision. This is my 13th year, and it's always exciting to see you all because you really are the future. And there's just three things about ExploraVision that are unique and wonderful, and I'm so glad you're all here. Just let me start by saying, you know, people say, well, I'm Bill Nye the Science Guy, to be sure, but I'm an engineer, really. I mean, I'm human, but I'm an engineer, and so what we want to do in engineering is use science to make things and solve problems, and that's what ExploraVision is all about. And you have to work in teams, and I'll tell you, when in real life, that's really important. So this team, the friendships you form now are going to be with you your whole life. And then the thing that's just so great about it, just speaking to the Toshiba executives, is it starts when you're really young. It starts in kindergarten. And that's, people ask me, when did you get interested in being a scientist or an engineer? I said, I don't remember. It was so long. I mean, not just because I'm old, but because it was so long ago. It was certainly before I was in kindergarten. So it's just great to see you all tonight. Thank you for including me again. I have just a few pictures I want to show you. I'll just take a couple hours here. Before I was born, my future employer, Boeing Commercial Airplane Company, had the Dash 80. This was before they made up the expression, the 700 series. This is the plane that became the 707. And it's beautiful. They're flying over the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area, beautiful thing. And for those of you who have never seen this, Boeing was a successful company, but it had a lot of competition, especially from Britain. There was a plane called the Comet, which was the first commercial jet airliner, and people thought that the British company would outcompete the US one. So the test pilot, who was a guy named Tex Johnston, and he, I guess, was from Texas, and he affected a Texas accent, just like his mentor in World War II was a guy named Chuck Yeager. And he said, I'm just going to fly this airplane. And so if you've never seen this, this was taken by a tourist in August of 1954 over Lake Washington, which is a glacial lake still in the city of Seattle. So he's flying the Dash 80 airplane. As we say in the airplane business, he flies uphill a little bit, and then he does this with it. Now, I don't know how many airliners you all have been on, but they very seldom roll them over. So he lands successfully, and Boeing management expresses concern. And they said, you know, Tex, what are you doing, you know, with our one airplane that we're hoping to like take over the world? He said, I'm selling airplanes. And then he said something to me that has stuck. He said something that has stuck with me my whole life. He said, this is before video at press conferences, okay? This is before everybody showed up with a cell phone. This was written down by a reporter. He said, one test is worth 1,000 expert opinions. And that is absolutely true, my friends. And so when you participate in ExploraVision, you are seeing that expert opinions are one thing, but getting it to actually work is something else. So I congratulate you all. You're all winners. It's fantastic. Now, I said I got interested in science before I was in kindergarten. Oh, this is a picture taken by, in those days, the guy was called the flight engineer. They had three people on planes like this because at that time, the planes were so complicated and the automated systems were so unsophisticated that they had to have a third person to watch the fuel gauges and stuff. And he took this picture. Anyway, I remember as a kid, I used to deliver the Washington Post. I grew up here in the city of Washington. And they ran this story from time to time in Ripley's Believe It or Not on Sundays. Insects, which have been flying for some 350 million years, defy the laws of aerodynamics. The bumblebee, considering its size, shape, and wingspan, is an aerodynamic misfit and should be unable to fly. And what are you going to do about it? You know. And even as a kid, I remember thinking, wait, Mr. Ripley, dude, have you seen bumblebees? They're fine. They don't know that you have this theory that explains that they can't do what they do. Dude. And then I realized at that time that, not everything grown-ups tell you is right. And furthermore, there's a lot about science, even with the bees that we rely on for our delicious honey, which I put on my peanut butter sandwiches. Even bees, which are sort of everyday objects, were not very well understood. In fact, it wasn't until long after I stopped working at Boeing. Oh, by the way, for any of you who fly on Boeing airplanes tomorrow, whatever, don't worry, I was very well supervised. It was under control. So I realized that even as a kid, that there's stuff that was just not, stuff in nature especially, that is just not very well understood. And by the way, one of the coaches and I worked at Boeing. Steve Chelly is here. Steve, yes. Second year. And we're both still alive. It's fantastic. So I remember in second grade, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. McGonigal told us, that was her name, Mrs. McGonigal, had a big book. And she read to us about the ancient dinosaurs. And she explained that the reason the ancient dinosaurs went extinct was because they had small brains. So the mammals took all their food, and the dinosaurs died. There. Now, even Ms. McGonigal knew that was just stupid, for crying out loud. Come on, and the new movie's going to come out, but like, imagine, I'm a Tyrannosaurus, and there's a rabbit. It's like... So it was in my lifetime, everybody. It was in my lifetime, after I was graduated from college, when I was like a grown-up, like paying taxes and stuff, that people discovered this layer of iridium metal, atomic number 77, around the world. All the iridium, geologists speculated, would sink to the middle of the Earth when the Earth was molten, it being heavy and everything. But this layer of iridium was all over the Earth because the Earth must have been hit with a giant smactor, or I guess impactor, that's what they call it. And so this is, the ancient dinosaurs may have had trouble the last couple million years, 10 million years, with some volcanism, a lot of sulfur dioxide, but they were finished off, no doubt, by a meteorite. And so this insight, I hope, will sooner or later change the world. And here's what I mean. We don't want this to happen again. Okay, this would be, for those of you, I guess, who use window machines, it's like Control-Alt-Delete for everybody. And so we are the first generation of people that could do something about this. You all, the scientists and engineers of tomorrow, are the first generation of students that could save the world because we now have a space program. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. It's not like it's going to happen anytime, but I remember when I was in class, in astronomy class, I had a very famous astronomer named Carl Sagan for one astronomy class. It changed my life, and he talked about the Tunguska event, which was it was not very well understood when he talked about it back during the disco era in the 1970s. But this was an event that happened in Siberia on what is now, we now call the 30th of June. By the way, in that part of Russia, they still hadn't embraced the Gregorian calendar, so it wasn't called the 30th of June. It was sometime in July or something. Anyway, all the trees were knocked down. hundreds of kilometers in every direction. And nowadays, we recognize this effect. People have done analysis, mathematical analysis on rocks in space and ice, and it's what we would nowadays call an airburst. So you guys all lived through an airburst. Over Chelyabinsk, Russia, a couple years ago, this rock comes in from outer space so fast, how fast was it, that the atmosphere can't get out of the way. Have you ever heard this story? Have you guys ever heard this? You know, if you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and you hit the water, it'll kill you because it's like concrete. Well, that apparently is true. I've never tried it. I discourage that. But apparently the rock asteroid is going so fast, it just shatters in the atmosphere. And a lot of these things are made of metal, and they just burn. I don't know if you've ever set fire to steel wool. I mean, I would never do that. I mean, but metal burns. Anyway, we don't want this to happen again, everybody. So I want you all to, if you don't, for some reason, decide not to work in aerospace, weird, at least be a voter and taxpayer that supports this kind of thing, because we got to come up with a way to give an asteroid a little nudge. Sooner or later, there are about 100,000 asteroids that cross the Earth's orbit, and sooner or later, there's going to be one with our name on it. We want to give it a little push, and that's up to you. So go ahead, you guys, save the world. Now, you're living through an extraordinary time. We have realized, people my age have realized that there are so many of us on Earth burning and breathing this atmosphere that we are changing the world's climate. And there are people who are skeptical of this. There are people who can't believe this could possibly be true. But here's the reason humankind is changing the environment. That's a picture of the Earth. And it is not out of focus. It was taken from the International Space Station. It's because there's an atmosphere. And the atmosphere is only this thick. That's the whole thing. If we had some extraordinary car that could climb ladders, and we had some crazy ladder road that went straight up, you could drive for an hour. Well, if you're trying to come into Washington from Northern Virginia, it'd be like 4 or 5 hours. Straight up, and you'd be in outer space. It's right there. Outer space is right there. As the saying goes, it's like the layer of varnish on a globe. It's so thin. And then the other problem is, I remember very well being at the New York World's Fair. Has anybody seen, what's it called, Future Village? Tomorrowland. Tomorrowland, yes. They're still obsessed with the 1964 World's Fair. It was cool, I will say. It was cool. They had phones with pictures, just like your mobile phone, only it was a little bigger than this stage. But there was a tote board showing the number of people, the estimated number of people in the world, and my family just missed it. We just missed it, changing from 2,999,999,999 people to 3 billion people. In 1965, the world had 3 billion people on it. Well, as of about lunchtime today, when I got back to my hotel room, the Earth now has almost 7.3 billion people. So in my lifetime, the human population, even if you include my old boss and say, well, he was human, which I was always skeptical, is 7.3 billion. It's more than doubled in my lifetime. It's substantially more, almost 30% more than doubled in my lifetime. And that's it, you guys. The atmosphere is this thick, and there's 7.3 billion of us breathing and burning. So you could, at this point, run in circles screaming. But that's really not that effective. I've tried it. I used to work for people who tried it, and you don't really get anywhere. But I've had an extraordinary experience recently. You may have heard about it. That really, just inspirational. Steve and I, back in the day, worked on the 747 airplane, another Boeing airplane, quite a bit bigger than the Dash 8707. That was Air Force One. And I went out there just a few weeks ago. And for those of you who've never been up to Air Force One, it is pretty cool. And if you can see the exhaust cone of the engine there, they polish it every day. The Air Force is out there every day polishing it. You could like shave, you know, or if I don't wear eye makeup, but you could put it on, you know, looking at this engine nacelle. But Steve and I were in the factory when that airplane came in for maintenance. It had a little problem. The yoke, the steering wheel, as it's called a yoke, had a little vibration. And some pilots it didn't bother them, but other pilots, there's this British guy especially, just really didn't like that. And so this is the kind of problem they give to the young guy, because when you're first out of school, you can still do math. And we made a tube that caused this vibration to destructively interfere with itself. So just rest assured, when I was invited to get a ride on Air Force One 40 years later, I told everybody that story. Yeah, it's a good thing I'm here. As I say, very well supervised. But I don't know how many of you have done this, but you know, when you get a ride on Air Force One, the President of the United States sits down next to you and starts telling jokes. It was the coolest thing. It was the coolest thing. And among the remarkable things he said to me a few weeks ago was, he said, if you think about it, if you had a choice, this is the time in history you would want to be alive. There's people who say, well, I'd want to be alive in the 1940s because the music was really good. Yeah, but you could die of a dozen diseases that we have eliminated. You know, I'd like to live in the 1920s when everybody had free booze. Yeah, but then the stock market crashed and you starved to death. Okay, no. If you're going to be, I'd like to live in ancient Rome. Oh, cool, as long as you're not one of the slaves, right? But the president said to me, if you're going to be alive, this would be the time to be alive. Strange as it may seem, the world is less violent than it's ever been in human history. Strange as much, when you watch the news, you might not believe that, but it is actually, there are fewer wars going on now than ever. People are healthier than ever. As much trouble as we have in the world, there is actually more food available to more people than ever before. So if you're going to be alive, this is the time. So to all the ExploraVision winners, I say, way to go. Way to be born right now. Nicely done. And so we talked about what we're going to do, what humankind is going to do to address climate change and improve the quality of life for all these 7+ billion people going on 9 billion humans. He and I solved all the world's problems while we were sitting there. There is more wind energy in just the state of North Dakota than we use in North America by about a factor of 5. There's more solar energy in the Four Corner region, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, by about a factor of 3 than we use in North America, if we just had a way to get it from there to where we all use it. For several years, I drove electric vehicles. After you guys drive an electric car, you'll never want to drive any other kind of car. They're the most fun. They're so quiet. They're elegant. They're beautiful. And we could store everybody's energy in everybody's car. Just like we know how many toilets are going to flush at halftime, we know where everybody's car is parked. So we could store everybody's energy in everybody's car. And this would be a fantastic thing. Then in the basement of every big building like this, we could have something like these liquid metal batteries that are hot on purpose. The big limitation with batteries is when they get hot, they lose their energy. But these are batteries that would be hot on purpose. And I want you guys to figure these details out so that you can, dare I say it, change the world. And then we got to move this energy around. That's going to take our smart electrical grid that's going to have these wonderful properties to only send electricity to where we need it. And then we will transmit it around North America, around Europe, around Japan, around the world, around Africa, through carbon nanotube power lines that you guys are going to invent, so that we can greatly reduce the cost of moving electricity around and save the world. And then the last thing I want you to do after you get the electricity generated and stored and transmitted, I want you to provide clean water to everyone in the world. And we can do that if we figure ways to take the salt out of water. You may have noticed that the Earth has a lot of water. You can see it in pictures from space. Maybe you've been to the beach and you notice you can't see the other side. This is a picture from California that just taken a few days ago, this month. In May, rather. And California's drying up. There's a big drought in California, and it's very reasonable, according to satellite studies taken with NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that this trend's going to continue for a long time. But if you had ways to take water out of the ocean and pump it around in the same way we pump oil around, it is reasonable that we could provide fresh water for California, but more importantly, for the whole world. We'd set up these so-called desalinization plants everywhere, and this would make it so that you all change the world. And so along this line, I just want us to remember that while we have these big problems to solve here on Earth, we still need to keep exploring. We still need to keep looking up and out. There are two questions that we have all asked, and if you meet somebody who says, I've never asked these two questions, they're lying to you. I'm sorry. Where did we all come from? And are we alone in the universe? Everyone has wondered those two deep questions. And to answer those questions, we have to explore space. And that's why I took this job as the head of the Planetary Society, to keep advancing space science and exploration, because we make discoveries in space that change the world. It's to the point, you guys, and I've watched you all, don't come running to me, you don't know which side of the street you're on till you check your phone. And then if it rains 18 minutes sooner than it was supposed to, everybody starts complaining. Well, that information about weather and which side of the street you're on, that comes from outer space. That comes from our ability to put satellites in orbit and explore farther and deeper into space. So I was watching The Tonight Show back in 1976. This is at the height of the disco era. You might have been working at the car wash. You might have been kung fu fighting. Or you might have just been doing the hustle, for those of you who remember. And Johnny Carson had Carl Sagan on. Turned out Johnny Carson was the host of The Tonight Show long before Jimmy Fallon, long before Jay Leno, and long before David Letterman emerged. And Carl Sagan presented this idea to Johnny Carson about a sail, a spacecraft made of material so shiny, how shiny is it, that light would give it a push. Now, everybody in this room, all these photons from all these lights are pushing on us, but it's a tiny, tiny force, about 9 micronewtons for every square meter. It's nothing. But if you have a spacecraft in space of low enough mass with shiny enough sail that's big enough, it gets a push. And so 39 years later, the Planetary Society, which was started by Carl Sagan, launched our solar sail. We launched it 2 weeks ago, Wednesday. And I am very happy to say that the solar panels have deployed. This is Bill's impression of a small satellite. And they're collecting sunlight, but the sail has not deployed yet because we have a little problem with the battery and some things. But I just want to emphasize, for those of you who've been following along, we had this thing where the memory filled up and you couldn't communicate with the satellite. Well, the guys, the men and women, figured out how to get that working. They overcame that problem. Then there was this thing where the gyroscopes were spinning and you couldn't stop them. They were using all the electricity. Solved that problem. Then this thing where you can't tell if the solar panels are really deploying. We solved that problem. So there's a problem right now with the batteries. They're in the fault condition. which is software talk for not working. And, but stay tuned. We're going to get this. The spacecraft is safe. It's in a safe orbit. It's healthy. We're going to figure this out. But I am very excited to tell you all that 39 years after Professor Sagan had this idea, his organization lives on. And Arthur, I don't want to shock you, but there'll be a time when neither you nor I are here. And we hope that ExploraVision keeps going long into the future. And then I hope that Dr. Lee's, Kim Lee's counterpart is up here in 20 years to tell us about what he or she is doing. So there's something else through the Tamagotchi program. Last year, Toshiba has been after me for quite a while. They convinced me to go to Japan. And for those who haven't been to Japan, I got to say, it is, as the kids say, all that. And I discovered this word that I just find fantastic. That in the Japanese language, there's a word for the beauty within the beauty. The hidden beauty, the subtle beauty, the beauty that you got to sit and think about. And there's this fabulous word, the yugen. And so they have the Sky Tree, which is this enormous building. And there are, for example, in Washington, D.C., how many people do we have now? 2 million people in the greater Washington area. In New York, there's 8 million people. Well, they're New Yorkers, but 8 million individuals. And then in Tokyo, there are 15 million people. And this thing is so tall, how tall is it? That everybody in the Tokyo area can have a line of sight. Their phone can communicate directly with this antenna. It's huge. And to me, it has a certain beauty. It has a shape that is reminiscent of a samurai sword. And you have to kind of look at it and think about it. And for me, the solar sail is this elegant thing. It's a spacecraft that's utilitarian. The idea is you put it in space, it gets a push from the sun, and you can send it to extraordinary destinations. You can send it to Mars or the moon or Saturn or Jupiter if you have time. It'll get pushed out there because although it has no rocket fuel, it's always getting a push. And it has an elegance. For me, it has a little yugen, all right? And so I hope that you all, as you go out to become engineers and change the world, I hope you appreciate that you want things not only to work and be utilitarian and serviceable and good, you want them to look cool. And so for those of you, I see a lot of you holding phones. Nowadays, the competition in phones is not only for what they do, but how they look and how the screen looks and how they perform. And I want you to keep that with you as you go forward. When you make anything, have it look nice, because it will just enrich your life and I hope fill you with joy. Now, in the coming months, I hope you all get a chance to embrace this idea that we're trying to send spacecraft to extraordinary new destinations in the solar system. This is a picture of Saturn that's built up from many, many pictures from the Cassini spacecraft, and it is beautiful. To me, this is, I don't want to pick planets. People say, hey, Bill, what's your favorite planet? And I say Earth. I mean, Earth's my favorite planet. This is where I was brought up. This is where my friends are. It's all about Earth for me. If it's Earth versus Saturn in the solar system cup, I'm all about Earth, all right? Nevertheless, Saturn is beautiful, and I just want you to look closely at this. Look at the North Pole of what humans call the North Pole of Saturn. I don't know if there are any Saturnians, and they may not call it the North Pole because they speak, Saturnian. But there's a circular storm or cloud on the North Pole of Saturn, but look closely, it's not a circle. It's a hexagon. It has 6 sides. And do you know why it has 6 sides on Saturn? Nobody knows why. And maybe you all will be the people who figure it out, and you'll learn something about the flow of fluids and storms that will change the world. So exploring space just helps us think differently about everything. In 2016, there will be a mission around Jupiter called Juno. Juno was Jupiter's wife in Greek mythology. And we will explore the planet Jupiter and learn more about its magnetic field and its gravity and whether or not the center of Jupiter is made of metals like the Earth, or is it solid hydrogen that is under so much gravitational pressure it acts like a metal. And that discovery will be made in your lifetime. Furthermore, Jupiter has 4 big moons, and one of them is Europa, and Europa has twice as much seawater in the Earth as the Earth. And in your lifetime, we very much hope to launch a mission to Europa and look for signs of life. And if we find signs of life on Europa, I'm telling you, it will change the course of human history. No one will think about what it means to be a living thing in the solar system in the same way again. And when I was talking to the president aboard Air Force One, we talked about how 100 years from now, people will know whether or not there's life on Europa. 100 years from now, people will know whether or not there's life on Mars. But I want to do it now. I want to look for life on Mars now. I want to make the discoveries about life in the solar system now, because it will change us. It will make us think very differently about the cosmos and our place within it, what I like to call our place in space. Now, on these 3 rovers, which are on Mars, there's the Spirit and Opportunity rover. By the way, Spirit is stuck in the sand, but Opportunity's still running. It launched, I went down to Cape Canaveral for the launch. It launched in 2004. I mean, rather, it launched in 2003. It arrived in 2004. So it's still running. There's been nobody changing the oil, no lubricating the bearings. It would be like having a car with a 3-year warranty and having it running with no maintenance, no rotating the tires, no brake pad, nothing, having it running 120 years later. That's not bad, people. That's your tax dollars at work right there. Anyway, the Curiosity rover landed in 2012. These 3 rovers each have a little calibration target, where you point the cameras at it and you get the colors right on Mars. You get the color of the rock. Geologists love to know what color the rocks are. They can't get enough of that. But on these little targets for getting the camera colors right, there's a message to the future. And this is the first message to the future put on spacecraft since Carl Sagan's day in the 1970s. We put messages on the Voyager spacecraft. And they're on each of the 3 rovers. They're tiny. They're about this big, squares of aluminum. And they have these little coupons of color. And then should you go to the Mars Gallery, which is under construction right now at the Smithsonian, but when they put it all back together, you can go see the display about the Mars rovers. And there is a replica, or it's actually the flight spare, the leftover sundial is sitting there. And around the edge of each of these things is a message to the future. And this is the first message to the future in almost 40 years. It says, we built these spacecraft in 2011. It arrived here in 2012. We built these instruments to look for signs of water and life, to learn about Mars' past, prepare for our future. But then it says, in very small letters, to those who visit here, we wish a safe journey and the joy of discovery. And that, my friends, is the essence of this business. That is what science is all about. That's why you participate in ExploraVision, is to feel that joy of discovery. And I'll tell you, our ancestors who did not feel the joy of discovery are not our ancestors. They got eliminated by the other people who thought it was cool to learn about nature and our place within it, to learn science, to learn this process allows us to make discoveries about the cosmos and nature and our place in it. And so, my friends, I very much hope that as you go forward for the rest of your lives, you experience that joy of discovery. Now, I've told this story a few more times, and I know many of you have been here before, but I can't resist it. This image was submitted to the Library of Congress last November. It was part of the Cassini spacecraft mission. It was a special picture taken when the spacecraft was in just the right place. So it's below the rings. It's in the southern hemisphere of Saturn, if that's what the Saturnians call it. And it's looking up through the rings, and they're lit by sunlight. but this is also a picture of the Earth. The Earth is right there. That's the whole deal, everybody. That's all 23 years of ExploraVision. That's every army that's ever lived, every oak tree, every sea jelly, every giant squid, every mushroom, the whole deal. Even my old boss conducted his entire life on this little dot in the middle of space. And if we go up there 1,000 kilometers, 100,000 kilometers, which in space travel is nothing, there's the same place right there. There's the Earth. It's just out in the cosmos. It's unremarkable in every way. And so after I had Mrs. McGonigal, I had Ms. Cochran for 3rd grade. And she told us there are more stars in the sky than grains of sand on the beach. And I remember thinking, Mrs. Cochran, have you ever been to a beach? For crying out loud. There's a lot of sand, lady. There cannot possibly be that. Wait, let me tell you something. There are about 100 times more stars in the observable universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. And let me just, for those of you familiar with the old television show, I mean, that is extraordinary. And I was a little kid. I was sitting there, come on, Mrs. Cochran. That's impossible. And then I was standing on the beach, and I used to have this thing where I'd watch my shadow get longer as the sun went down. And I was thinking, I wonder if you were out there in space, you know, on your spaceship with a pair of binoculars or something, and then you could see my shadow. You know, I'd wave my arms to wave to the aliens looking at the Earth with binoculars. and nobody, you know, no aliens ever said anything. But I realized that you would not possibly see me. I mean, look at this. It's just nothing. So I started to think that I'm really no different from these grains of sand. I'm just another grain of sand. I'm just a speck with these specks on the beach, which is a bunch of specks, and they are on the Earth, which really, if you look at it like this, is just another speck. I'm a speck standing on specks, which are part of a speck, with a bunch of other specks orbiting the sun by the completely unremarkable star. There's nothing special about the sun. There's billions of them. I'm a speck on a speck, orbiting a speck, in the middle of specklessness. I am nothing. I am nobody. But with my brain, which is just this big, and my old bosses, of course, quite a bit smaller, but with your brain, you can imagine all of that, my friends. So my ExploraVisioners, I want you to go forward and use your brains and celebrate the joy of discovery, and dare I say it, change the world. Thank you all very much. Congratulations. Thank you.